What's up, friends? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Thanks so much for joining me today. I know it is still fresh and raw and frustrating and disappointing. Nothing's changed in the last, 48 hours-ish since the Packers lost to the Detroit Lions, eliminating their chances at a playoff berth and ending their season, quite frankly. So, still want to go over kind of our normal thing that we do here every Tuesday, and that's go over the grades for the game, the film review. Had the opportunity to go through all the All-22. So yes, I lived this game live. I rewatched the game. I've talked about it ad nauseum, and then I went back and watched every single player on every single play because I am an extreme glutton for punishment. And for some weird reason, I actually find it fun, even though I know the ending and how much it's going to sting when I see everything all over again. But it's still interesting to see who played well, who didn't, who came up big in key moments, who didn't. And those are always fun things to talk about and go over, even when the game didn't go your way. Because if we don't know who did things wrong and if we don't know who did things well, it's really tough to make suggestions and think about what the Packers should do moving forward. So we'll discuss all of that today. And of course, we had a lot of other things going on as well. We had the last locker room availability. We had Matt LaFleur talk for his season-ending press conference as well. So let's kick things off sort of in the order of operations that things went with locker room availability. It seemed like the main takeaway from the reporters that were in the locker room was from David Bakhtiari. And he basically stated that he has no plans of retirement, that his knee stabilized during the course of the year, that he wants to be back with the team. And really the reason that he was having struggles earlier in the year was more because he didn't have the ability to have that off-season training and strengthen, his basically his body and, kind of get into the normal game shape that he was if he was able to practice throughout the entirety of the off-season. So it sounds like as the season progressed and as his body was able to kind of continue to ramp up and get used to the normal rigors of an NFL schedule, that his body responded to it very well. Then he, of course, had the appendectomy, which set him back a little bit more, but it sounds like he is full speed ahead. And when Matt LaFleur was asked about it, it seems like he's very confident with David Bakhtiari as well. So that is still a major decision for Brian Gutekunst, Russ Ball, Matt LaFleur, etc. That knee has obviously been extremely troublesome and very bothersome. So they're going to have to make a decision just on pure risk reward, right? But that will be a very important decision for the Packers this offseason. The other key thing that was taken away from the open locker room period was basically the sort of apology and interview with Quay Walker. He had earlier in the day put out a post on Twitter, I guess more of a thread on Twitter, sort of apologizing, asking for forgiveness. He did mention that he apologized to the athletic trainer in question and reached out to them and just kind of asked for the same thing, for forgiveness. So again, we talked about it yesterday. It was unacceptable by Quay, cannot happen. His second time being ejected, and it was a very big penalty at the time and just a stupid move, right? I'm a pretty firm believer. Now, obviously, there are layers to this and different, some mistakes it's harder to come back from, obviously, but I'm a very firm believer that it's not always about the mistake that you make, but it's how you respond to the mistake. And I would say, it's mostly low-hanging fruit from Quay so far. It's a statement and it's an apology. Both things should be expected, but in today's day and age, you can't expect people always doing the right things, even when they've made a clear and obvious mistake. So I think not much more Quay could have done in this situation so far, then apologize, reach out to the athletic trainer and apologize them person to person, and then, issue the statement as well. And now the main thing left for Quay is to just learn from the mistake. He didn't learn from his first ejection, which led to his second ejection. This is something that he has to learn from. And obviously nothing like this can happen again for him. And I think he'll learn from it. Matt LaFleur stood up for him as a person, didn't stand up for the error or the mistake, understandably so, but did stand up for the person. I do think that while it's been 2 ejections, I don't foresee that being something that just continues to happen with Quay. And I hope I'm not wrong about that. But again, I think he did the right thing in that situation in apologizing person to person, putting out the statement. And now the bigger thing is going to be his actions moving forward. And I do have faith in Quay that hopefully he's going to be able to get past this and, just be better about it moving forward. That gets us to Matt LaFleur. And obviously the big talk in his press conference was about his staff and specifically about Joe Barry. So when asked about Joe Barry and if he would be back this year, Matt LaFleur's comment was he anticipates Joe Barry to be back. And he later clarified and basically stated his intention is to have everyone back on his staff. So first, a couple things, right? First of all, coaches lie. We've seen coaches, general managers, owners, etc., go up to that podium and lie. So just because he said that that's going to be the case, that he is expecting all of his coaches to be back, doesn't necessarily mean that that's the case. That being said, I believe him. I do think he's probably going to evaluate his staff overall. I don't expect a coordinator change with Stenavich or with Joe Barry based on his comments. Could it still come? Yeah. But right now, I more lean towards Joe Barry's probably going to be back this season, and I take Matt LaFleur at his word for what he said in his press conference. The other thing is that I know there's going to be a lot of discussion and conversation about this, right? So when it comes to Joe Barry, I don't even know that it's a divisive topic. It's just like kind of I don't know that there's anyone that's like out there just being like, man, I got to fight for Joe Barry. I love Joe Barry. It's like the great coordinator, and like he's my guy. But as I talked about yesterday, he fought for his job at the end of this year and kind of earned it in some capacity. Now, I'm not defending him. I'm not saying he's a great coordinator. I'm not saying that I ever think Joe Barry has the ability to, put together a top 10 defense. I'm not there yet. I think we need to see a lot more. This is his third, defensive coordinator post. This is now, he's had time in this position. This was his second year. And I'm left wanting a lot more from this defense. I think there needs to be a new plan, new ideas, and you don't need to reinvent the scheme or anything like that. But there has to be more than what we saw these past two seasons from Joe Barry. So, listen, I get after something goes wrong, after a season goes not the way that you expected it to at all. What is the gut reaction for everyone? Fire this person, fire that person, fire everyone, right? And, look at the Houston Texans. Fire a coach after 1 year, fire another coach after 1 year. Cliff Kingsbury gets fired for the Cardinals. I saw the stat that they've never had a coach for more than 6 years in their entirety of their franchise, which has been around for a long time now. Like, you got to be careful. Just firing for the sake of firing doesn't necessarily going to mean you're in a better place. I mean, you can make an argument. Mike Pettin to Joe Barry is a great example of that. Is the defense really that different from Mike Pettin to Joe Barry? No, not really. I don't know that it's, better or worse and, different. It's just kind of a little bit different. I don't think it's necessarily better or worse. I don't know that Barry's better than Pettin or Pettin's better than Barry. I just, at this point, I don't know that was a net positive for the Packers. So firing Joe Barry just to go to the next guy doesn't necessarily do anything. Like I said, I'm not sitting here or, telling you, that they should keep him or defending his job, but he did complicate things by putting together a pretty impressive stretch towards the end of this year. So we'll see if he comes back. I don't hate continuity. I don't. I do think there is some things that you can take away from that, but it just has to be better all the way around, from Adam Stenavich, from Joe Barry, from Matt LaFleur, from the passing coordinators, etc. It just needs to be better. This coaching staff as a whole was not good enough in 2022. So if you want to bring them back for the sake of continuity and bringing them back and keep heading in a similar direction, that's fine. But it better be a heck of a lot better in 2023, or that is going to be a massive reflection on Matt LaFleur. And now, instead of being like, hey, and I know some people are already on the, are frustrated with Matt LaFleur, but the majority are more of like, hey, make some changes to your coaching staff and let's see if we can make this better. If LaFleur's decision is to stick with all these coaches and they don't succeed in 2023, now it's like, hey, this was on you. These were the guys that you wanted. These were the guys that you wanted to specifically keep going into 2023, even after a questionable 2022. Now this is on you. And the last thing I'll add here is he does have to be a little bit careful too. And I know Nathaniel Hackett was not his fault, right? Meaning how Hackett left, he got a head coaching job promotion, but he's now had 2 offensive coordinators. He's not, if he moved on from Joe Barry, he would now have 3 defensive coordinators in his stint in Green Bay so far. And he's already had 3 special teams coordinators. So there's been a lot of movement on the core of his staff, and that can be a problem as well. So listen, like I said, I don't know how I feel about it. I don't feel great about it. I'll say that much. But at the same token, I'm not all fire and brimstone, and I think there is a way that this defense can improve. I think we saw a really improved defense towards the end of this year. There's some really good stuff against Miami, Minnesota, and even in this last game against Detroit that I really liked out of Joe Barry. So this team can play and they can be better just with the coaches that they have on staff, but there's going to be a lot more pressure on Matt LaFleur and the staff in 2023 if he does in fact decide to keep everyone together. A couple other things from LaFleur. He did mention that he was open to Nathaniel Hackett returning. There was nothing in motion. There's nothing that, he's going to come back. I certainly don't think he's going to come in and get his offensive coordinator position back. That's going to be Adam Stanovich's job unless something changes, which by all indications from Matt LaFleur, it is not going to. But you can hire him as an assistant head coach or, there's a consultant. There's a variety of ways that you can get him back in the building. If that could happen, I think that'd be a great thing. I think Nathaniel Hackett was really, really great for this Packers team. You could have a situation where maybe Tom Clements ends up retiring and maybe Hackett goes to quarterbacks coach and, adds, assistant head coach to his duties off that, or maybe they create a job and they just say, hey, he's going to be red zone coordinator. And that's what Nathaniel Hackett's job is. And they could certainly use it after this past season. So that will be a interesting one to keep an eye on. Again, it didn't seem like anything was imminent, but it did sound like they've at least had some conversations and he would be open to Nathaniel Hackett returning and spoke very highly of Nathaniel Hackett once again. And then last but not least, he was asked about play calling duties, and he did also make mention that he would be willing to give up play calling duties if it was right for the team. Again, nothing imminent. I don't necessarily think that that's what's going to happen, but maybe that's what you do with Nathaniel Hackett, right? Maybe Adam Stenovich keeps the offensive coordinator title in specific title, and maybe Nathaniel Hackett comes in as red zone coordinator and play caller. And maybe that's how you get him on the staff and he actually ends up calling the plays. That could be something that he is capable of doing. So a lot of potential moving parts. I don't know that we got anything definitive out of Matt LaFleur, but I will say this. If there was one message that really went through everything from Matt LaFleur, from players to coaches to all of it, it definitely seemed continuity was on his mind. There was no impression that he wants to go in another direction. There was no impression that he wants to clear house on his staff in any way. There was no, anything about moving on from players or anything like that. The constant tone was keeping as many of the players on this team as possible together and keeping this coaching staff together as they head forward. Whether or not that's the right call will remain to be seen. But the other thing that I'll say to that is there's a lot of time left. There's a lot of conversations to be had, and he is not the only one that is involved in those conversations. For better or worse, remember Brian Gutekunst, Russ Ball on equal playing fields as Matt LaFleur, and Mark Murphy will oversees all three of them. So there are going to be some major opinions, I am sure, in that room in the direction of in what direction Green Bay should go in. And Matt LaFleur does not have final say. But it was clear, if he's being transparent with us, which you never quite know, but if he's being transparent with us, it was clear that his message was one of moving forward with this team at its core and a message of continuity with his staff, players, team overall. What that actually means will remain to be seen. It is an extremely long offseason, and like I said, there's going to be a lot of conversations and a lot of ideas that go on as to how this Green Bay team can improve. And it's really important for them to have those conversations. And as Matt LaFleur mentioned right after the game, they need to go through this team with a fine-tooth comb, figure out what's working and what's not, and make the decisions as appropriate. So that I would hope has not happened yet, because you could not do that in the time that it took from end of game until his press conference on Monday. But I still think those are going to be things that they need to go through, and then he'll probably have a better idea of what direction he wants to go in, especially after consulting with Ball and Goody and Murphy, etc. So we will keep an eye on that. Last but not least, before we get into our grades and tape review for this week, was going through the tape, and I'm watching Aaron Rodgers' final interception, the last play on offense of the season, where he throws into double coverage and Lions pick it off, and the rest is history, right? I'm looking at that play and I'm like, man, that looks familiar. Why does that look familiar? And I'm thinking back, I'm like, that reminds me a lot of when Aaron Rodgers threw into double coverage to Devonte Adams last year with the game on the line. Wouldn't you know, It's a slightly different formation, slightly different formation. I think really the only thing is that the running back was set up on the wing against San Francisco, and the running back was set up in the backfield against Detroit. But other than that, you've got Devonte Adams on a 9 route to the right. You've got Christian Watson on a 9 route to the right, meaning in year to year, right? Last year it was Adams. This year it was Watson. Last year you had Equanimeous St. Brown running another 9 route kind of up the seam. This year, it was Randall Cobb running a 9 route up the seam. You had the tight end and the running back helping in to chip, the tight end releasing out at the end. And then you've got Allen Lazard in both seasons running a deep in route, an in-cutting route, that after the 2 clear routes come, Lazard's going to come and open up in the middle of the field. The exact same play call. Last year against San Francisco, no pressure. Rodgers predetermined the throw, threw it into double coverage to Devonte, incomplete. The rest was history. This year, and last year, Lazard was wide open on the play. Wide open. And that was the design of the play, was to go to Lazard. It just didn't go there. This year, Lazard's about to come open again. It took him longer, and he didn't gain the separation that he did last year. And more importantly, the pressure was so immediately on Rodgers that it would have been extremely hard to get back to Lazard. And just like, it would have been like basically a blind trust throw at that point, which is basically what he threw to Watson anyway. But it would have been a lot more difficult this year to hit Lazard. But just beyond crazy that in 2 back-to-back home losses in elimination games, that the last play on offense, when the game was on the line, was the exact same play. And this, 2 years ago, or last year, I should say, fly to Devonte, double coverage, fell incomplete. This year, fly to Watson, single coverage, but safety over the top. And the safety over the top gets there and picks off the ball. So just a little extra kick to the gut when you're down already, that the same play basically ended their season in back-to-back years. All right, enough of that fun talk. Let's talk about our grades in this game. There's actually some positives to take away. So let's start on the positive side of thing. Top 3 graded players on offense: Christian Watson plus 0.55, David Bakhtiari plus 0.5, Allen Lazard plus 0.45. So those are my top 3 graded offensive players in this game. Really like this game from Watson. There's a couple, the one thing I will say about Watson, and I know I said I'm going to start positive, so I apologize, but the one thing about Watson is he will stop. He will not go, I shouldn't say he stopped. He doesn't stop, but he will not go fully through routes. That has been an issue throughout the season, and it is driving me nuts because he is so fast, and he's usually an effort guy in every other sense of the way. Just go through your route. I just need to see Christian Watson finish every single one of his routes. I don't care if he's the 5th guy in the, as in the progression. Just keep going through your routes at full speed, because there would have been, I think, some opportunities throughout this season that he could have gotten the ball had he done that. That's something he needs to work on. But the deep ball down the field, he's an effort blocker once again that showed up on tape. And he comes up with some huge third downs, including late in the game where he catches the little swing pass and gets outside. Great block by Lazard, and gets around the corner, picks up a first down. Just a really impressive game by Christian Watson. So he grades out highest on offense, and he's been awesome since week 8. He's just legitimately been awesome, and it's super exciting to see what he's going to be capable of doing in a full season next year. Hopefully he can avoid all injuries and we can see a fully healthy Christian Watson for the entirety of the year. That would be really nice. Number 2, I know PFF didn't have him quite as high, and I know the offensive line as a whole played poorly. I still had David Bakhtiari very high on my list. He was number 2, plus 0.5. I thought he had a nice game. Not his best game, and he certainly struggled a little bit in the run game, but he was still sound as a pass protector. And, going against Aiden Hutchinson at times, I still thought this was a very sound performance from Bakhtiari. He ended up number 2. And then Allen Lazard was 3, had the touchdown in the back of the end zone, had some key third down conversions, did have the huge drop. Had it not been for the drop, probably would have been my highest graded offensive player. But still, really nice game from Lazard. Had some really key blocks as well. This was just another one of those really sound overall performances from Allen that mostly goes unnoticed, but you put the tape on and you're like, yeah, just another really nice performance, a winning performance from Allen Lazard. So Watson, Bakhtiari, and Lazard, my top 3. Then my top 3 on defense, Devonte Wyatt, number one on my list, which is probably the biggest, most exciting takeaway from this game. Jarran Reed, plus 0.75, number two. Jair Alexander, plus 0.7, number three. Let's start with Alexander. Just a really sound day in coverage. Didn't have too much to do in the running game. Did have the one swing pass where the guy tried to hurdle him and he made the tackle in like midair. But just really, really great coverage all day long in zone and man. It didn't matter. His guy was not getting open. And then you had Jarran Reed, who I thought had another really impressive performance. He didn't play quite as well against Minnesota, but the phenomenal performance against Miami. And then he backed it up in this game as well. Just some effort plays, was able to be disruptive into the backfield, held up at the point of attack against double teams. Really nice day for Jarran Reed. And then the big one, Devonte Wyatt. I saw a lot that I needed to see, to the point where it's like, man, how did this guy not play sooner? He held up in the run game. He held up at the point of attack against double teams when he needed to. He was disruptive into the backfield. He was able to, put on one of his patented spin moves on a play. And then, of course, he has the big sack fumble as well, which the quarterback recovered, Goff recovered, but still could have been a really big play had the ball just bounced a little bit differently. Still a really nice pressure, got inside, got the sack on Goff, got the ball out. Just unlucky that it bounced right back to Jared Goff. But this was a really great performance from Devonte Wyatt. He's really stepped up big since Dean Lowry has gone out. And after seeing just like 9 snaps a game of middling play, struggled it last week in his first game in full, kind of more full-time duty against Minnesota. Not in like a really bad way, it took him, oh, hey, I'm not playing 9 snaps anymore. I'm playing 35 to 40 snaps now. And then to bounce back this week in a really key game against the Lions and have that game, that is a real positive at the end of the season for Devonte Wyatt. So my top players again in this game, Watson, Bakhtiari, and Lazard on offense, Wyatt, Reed, and Alexander on defense. My bottom graded players on offense, Yosh Nijman, number one, negative 0.9. They were right to pull him and put in Zach Tom. It's a disappointing way for Yosh to end the season because he put some really good tape out there. He looked at times like he could be a legitimate starter. This was a rough game, and they really needed him in this game. Hutchinson gave him problems. It wasn't a good enough performance. The one play where he allowed the play to Hutchinson that was almost a sack fumble, that even wasn't one of his worst. He actually had Hutchinson in a good spot, and then Runyon kind of came and shoved Hutchinson out, and then Hutchinson kind of got around him because I don't think Nijman was expecting it. And I think Nijman's like, I got this play, and then Runyon kind of pushed him to the side, and then Rodgers is trying to buy time. I didn't really put that one on Yosh, but you go back and watch the rest of it, and it was just a really rough performance, both in the passing game and in the run game. Number two, Aaron Jones, for obvious reasons. The huge fumble. He had a nice game outside of the fumble, but it was just a massive fumble and a massive moment that can't happen and arguably turned the game completely in the favor of the Lions at that point. And then Josh Myers, number three. I have said it all year long. He is insanely inconsistent to the point where I do not think you can go into 2023 with just the idea that Josh is the starting center or one of the best 5 offensive linemen, and we don't have to worry about that spot. I don't think you can do that. I think they have to legitimately look of hey, maybe do we need to move him to guard so he doesn't have quite as much on his plate and he can just focus on his play and not have to do as much at the line of scrimmage so he can just, go out there and play a little bit more? Or do you just try to say, hey, we need to get him competition? I don't know. Elton can play center. Zach Tom might be able to play center. A couple different ways that they could go there, but I am not ready to say that Josh Myers is a legitimate starting center. I did not see that this year at all. I saw a below average center and an area that could be very easily, not easily, but that they should look to upgrade. I hope this by Josh Myers. I legitimately do. I hope that he just plays awesome next year. He is super talented. And I know that the Creed Humphrey was the very next pick. Everyone, including myself, loved Creed Humphrey coming out of college. He was an absolute stud. It seemed like a no-brainer pick if you were going with a center. The fact he fell to the Packers in the second round felt like just this perfect scenario. And then they picked Josh Myers. I was one of the few that when I put on the tape of Myers, and clearly I was wrong, not had him better than Creed at all. I'm not going to go that far. But I really liked him, and I could understand at the time why maybe you would like Myers and his, kind of prototype a little bit more. He just has a little bit more size, a little bit more bulk, a little bit, better height. He looked a little bit more like an NFL center than Creed did. I loved Creed, so I'm not saying that I wouldn't have taken Creed. I would have, but I understood the selection, and I was excited about the pick. it just has not turned out so far. And that's one that they've got to figure out a way to get right, because they really need him to be a successful center for them moving forward. Bottom three on defense, Justin Hollins just couldn't do anything against either tackle. He was just in no man's land all game long, couldn't hold up against the run. I think one point he just got thrown to the side, couldn't get anything from a pass rush standpoint. He was a nice pickup and had some nice plays. This was not his game. Quay Walker, the ejection, a huge part of that in a key moment. Not only are you giving the opposing team an automatic first down, goal to go, you're giving them yardage, and you're getting kicked out of the game. Outside of that, he was up and down, kind of a normal Quay Walker game, but that ejection was just massive. And then number three, Devondre Campbell, good in coverage. I thought he lacked physicality in the run game, which is why I had him a little bit lower than I know PFF had him in a positive grade. I had him in a negative in large part due to his physicality in the run game. So bottom three on offense, Yash, Aaron Jones, and Josh Myers. And then bottom three on defense, Hollins, Walker, and Campbell. That pretty much does it. The last thing I wanted to say is just as this offseason moves forward, just remember to take this one step at a time. There's going to be a ton that happens, from probably maybe some minor coaching changes to, some releases, some salary cap, restructures, to Aaron Rodgers announcing if he's going to come back or stay, or they trade, whatever may happen there. What happens with Jordan Love? You're going to have the draft, a top 15 pick. You're going to have free agency. Guys are going to add to the team. Guys are going to go away from the team. The Packers have a major decision of what they want to do moving forward. They can try to go all in again. They can have some sort of middling ground, or they can rip the Band-Aid and say, hey, we're going young. There's a lot that is going to have to happen with this team this offseason. I'm extremely excited to cover it because I think this is a franchise-altering offseason again. They had one last year with the decision to go all in again, or get the boatload of picks from Denver and do the Aaron Rodgers trade. They didn't do that. They should have, in hindsight. I said it at the time. I think it's even more true now. But I understand. I understood at the time. I understand now why they didn't do it. I get it. It's really hard to make that move. But now they have another really crazy offseason ahead of them. And we'll take it one day at a time, one step at a time. I'll have all the breakdowns, salary cap, draft, free agency, some free agency 101 stuff. So if you're not following already, or if you're not subscribed already, please make sure to do so. Of course, I'll be right back here tomorrow with an all-new episode. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.